the last episode, we explored the story of Hannah and how God used this seemingly insignificant woman to change the course of history. And today, we're looking at a woman whose story is frequently told, but who is often misunderstood, Martha. I don't know about you, but as a woman, the idea that Martha was in the wrong when she was busy in the kitchen getting ready to feed a bunch of unexpected guests, whereas Mary, who sits at Jesus' feet and leaves Martha in the kitchen to do it all, is in the right, seems pretty unfair. When we look at our Bible heroes, let's have a look. David committed adultery, Sarah doubted, Abraham was a liar, Eve disobeyed. It seems almost laughable that Martha's sin was that she was too hospitable. A bit like being told you're in trouble for working too hard or caring too much, isn't it? Of course, there is far more to the story than that, but let's keep things in perspective. She was just doing the best she knew to serve Jesus, wasn't she? So why did Jesus correct her? To understand this fully, we need to look closely at the words he spoke to her. Martha, my beloved Martha, why are you upset and troubled, pulled away by all these many distractions? Are they really that important? Mary has discovered the one thing most important by choosing to sit at my feet. She is undistracted, and I won't take this privilege from her. Don't you just love the way that Jesus says her name twice? Martha, my beloved Martha. By doing so, it's almost as if he's saying, listen closely, this is really important. And we can sense as we're looking in on this conversation that he wants her to see things as he sees them. Now, the repetition of someone's name is pretty significant in Scripture. We see this use of saying someone else's name elsewhere, and every time it's at a poignant or pivotal moment in people's lives. God calls Abraham, Abraham, just before he sacrifices Isaac. Moses, Moses at the burning bush, calling him to mission. Samuel, Samuel, when calling the boy prophet. Simon, Simon, just before Peter denies Jesus 3 times. Saul, Saul, just before Paul's conversion on the Damascus road. So when Jesus says, Martha, Martha, we know something profound is happening. Have you ever had one of those days where everything just gets on top of you and you just burst out with anger or impatience? And of course, it's not always related to what's actually happening at the moment. It's just like all the things that you've kept inside you, kept contained, no longer stay there, and they suddenly burst out, they erupt. I know I have. And to me, this bit of the story does feel a little bit like one of those moments. Maybe Martha felt like she was carrying the weight of hospitality for Jesus and his disciples without Mary pulling her weight. Certainly her words when she bursts out, Lord, don't you care? Seem to be from the impulsive overflow of an anxious heart. But to truly appreciate Martha's perspective, we need to step back and consider the cultural context of the story, because this story takes place in Martha's home. And in Middle Eastern culture, hospitality is just so important. Even to this day, providing extravagant hospitality is considered sacred in many Middle Eastern cultures. In Alistair Humphrey's book, The Boy Who Biked the World, which is about his journeys he cycled around the world, he tells of a number of times where people would host him and actually go hungry themselves in order to feed him this incredible, extravagant feast, because the culture of hospitality is so important in the Middle East. And so it's in this context that Martha is working hard to provide food for her unexpected guests. And there's something else at play here that we might easily miss, because seeing Mary sitting at Jesus' feet could have been quite challenging for Martha, because by doing so, Mary was posturing herself as a disciple, because only disciples sat at the rabbi's feet. And perhaps this was why her sister was either angry or embarrassed. Perhaps she believed it wasn't acceptable. Perhaps Martha was feeling that she was second best because Mary was the spiritual one sitting at Jesus' feet. After all, this is the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. Martha is the one here we see working hard behind the scenes. We don't know. We can only imagine how she was feeling, but we can certainly see that she was feeling frustrated. As women today, we carry so much. We juggle responsibility, hold our families together, do loads of behind the scenes work that nobody sees just to keep everything functioning. And there's a huge tension, of course, between being and doing. And yet often it's the ones who are seen up front who are just perceived as the truly spiritual ones. And it can sometimes leave us feeling like all our effort and our faithfulness behind the scenes isn't quite enough. As if we'd be better people, better Christians, if we could just slow down and sit with Jesus. But for many of us, that's not always possible in the way it was for Mary. Maybe that's not a failure, it's just a different kind of faithfulness. Because the beautiful thing about Martha's story is that Jesus wasn't criticizing her busyness. He just wanted her to know that she was seen. And maybe that's what he's wanting us to know today, that all our serving, all those small things we do behind the scenes that nobody sees, are seen by him. So with this context in mind, let's take a look again at Jesus' response that tells us what he sees in this situation. Where he says to Martha, "Why are you upset and troubled, pulled away by all these many distractions?" Jesus addresses what's causing Martha's distress, not just the symptoms. Oh man, as I'm reading these words, it really speaks to me. I think because that's so what we have today, isn't it? Many distractions, so many distractions. And in this translation, it says she's pulled away by the distractions. And in the Message version, it says, "You're fussing far too much and getting yourself worked up over nothing." And the NIV, it says, "You're worried and upset about many things." Please notice, Jesus doesn't criticize Martha's service itself. It's her state of mind, her anxiety that concerns him. Jesus' words are not a harsh rebuke. They are the loving correction of a friend who sees Martha's heart. He knows her anxious thoughts and her desire to serve well. His invitation to her is tender, not scolding. It's the loving words of one friend to another when they see that they're going off course. Martha, of course, is far too busy with doing things, while her sister Mary is focused on being. She allowed herself to be pulled away by the distractions, but the phrase says that she was pulled away. So what was she pulled away from? From spending time with Jesus. She was fussing far too much and getting worked up over nothing, and Jesus knew that when she looked back on this moment, she would regret not spending that time with him, and that the things she was getting worked up over would seem like nothing. For Martha to get so upset, it does seem likely that she was storing up some resentments, that she'd allowed small niggles to build up and become bigger worries or anxieties, as of course we often do too. Perhaps she didn't have anyone she could talk to, especially if her sister was one of the things she was worried or upset about. Perhaps instead of dealing with the worries as they came up or talking with someone about why she was upset, everything just kept going round and round inside her head in a whirl of emotions. Ephesians 4, verse 26, it reminds us, "Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil." And that's a really good principle to live by. Living with anger is never a good thing. And one thing that is different for us than it was with Martha is that we do have someone we can always take our worries and cares to, that we can speak about our burdens and even our resentments to, because we have something Martha never had. In Paul's letter to the Corinthians, he reminds them that God lives inside them, that we can always take our cares to him, and that the Holy Spirit dwells within us, providing constant companionship and guidance. Martha could only experience this, of course, in Jesus' physical presence. The words of the Lord's Prayer, of course, are a very good guide, and they invite us to lay down things. Their words remind us that we have a Father who cares, that it's God who gives us our daily bread, the things we need for today, that resentment is a burden and forgiveness is how we lay it down. So when it does feel like life is pulling us in every direction or feels busy or chaotic, we don't have to carry it all alone. That same Jesus who spoke so gently to Martha is with us through his Holy Spirit, ready to listen, to steady us, and to remind us that we are already loved. Now, there's something important to understand about the timing of this encounter. When we place it in the timeline of Jesus' ministry, it takes on an even deeper significance. The story takes place in the village of Bethany, which is just a couple of miles from Jerusalem. And the location is significant because it means that when Lazarus dies, it's not just Martha and Mary mourning. All of Jerusalem is watching, and the religious leaders are paying close attention to see how Jesus will respond. Now, John tells us that Jesus waited 2 days before going to Bethany, which is just a couple of miles from Jerusalem. And it's only on the third day that he says to the disciples, "Come, it's time to go to Bethany." And their immediate response is, "Do you really want to go back there? Because it was just a short time ago that they wanted to stone you." And of course, what happens next becomes a turning point in Jesus' ministry. Because after he raises Lazarus from the dead, many of those who came from Jerusalem to grieve with Mary and Martha saw what happened, and many believed. But a few went back to Jerusalem and reported what they'd seen to the Pharisees. And this was the final straw for the Pharisees and the religious leaders. And it was from this time on that they decided to kill him. The Bible tells us this. They were afraid that if they allowed him to continue, that the Romans would take action and destroy their country and their people. And so from that day on, they were committed to killing Jesus. I want you to think about this for a moment, because knowing all that would befall him, for the sake of his friend, Jesus still went to Bethany. He knew what it would trigger. He knew what it would mean, but he did it knowing that by raising Lazarus from the dead, he was as good as signing his own death warrant. And given, of course, that he foreknew that his time was short, he also knew that Martha would regret her choice to be busy rather than spend these precious moments with her friend. I think sometimes we see these words to Martha as a rebuke. What if instead they are an invitation to spend these precious last few hours with him before Easter week starts to unfold? As women, of course, there's always going to be a lot to do. Life is busy, but each day we have a choice. In a world that constantly demands our time and attention, we have a daily invitation from Jesus. Will we make time in our day for Jesus, spend time with him, listen as he speaks, and invite him into our homes each day? Or will we allow ourselves to stay busy with all the distractions of life and things that need to be done? Have you ever wondered why Jesus waited a couple of days before going to Bethany? Back in the day, they didn't have modern medicine or doctors or ways to be completely certain when someone had died. And in those days, there was also a belief among some of the Jews that the soul lingered near the body for 3 days after death, hoping to return to it. And that's why it's so significant that Jesus waited until Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, because by then there was no doubt that Lazarus was dead. Jesus wasn't late. He timed his arrival perfectly. And of course, just because he didn't rush to Lazarus didn't mean he didn't care, but he had a greater purpose. So often when we find ourselves waiting, we wonder why Jesus hasn't shown up yet, why that breakthrough hasn't come. Maybe what we need to do is remember that what looks like a delay to us may actually be perfect timing to him. Now, there's an interesting connection between this story and another famous parable of Jesus that I think gives us a bit of a deeper insight. In the book of Luke, the story of Jesus visiting Mary and Martha follows right after the story of the Good Samaritan. And of course, the parable of the Good Samaritan is about the religious people who walked by on the other side of the road when they saw a bleeding man, in comparison to the Samaritan who was moved with compassion and helped him, the one who actually took action. And in the story of the Good Samaritan, of course, both the priest and the Levite, the religious men, crossed to the other side of the road. But it's the Samaritan who, in my version, which is the Passion Translation, it says, was moved with tender compassion. The point Jesus was using this story to illustrate, because he was having a discussion with a religious scholar about what requirement must I fulfill if I want to live eternally. And Jesus had asked him, what do you read in the law? How do you understand it? And the religious scholar had answered, well, it states that you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your passion, all your energy, and your every thought. And you must love your neighbor as yourself. And that's the point that Jesus was making with the parable of the Good Samaritan. He was telling us what it looked like to love your neighbor, to go the extra mile. And as we saw in the story of Boaz, Ruth, and Naomi a few episodes ago, this was the heart that Boaz had. He went the extra mile for this woman who turned up in his field to protect and provide for her. He went far beyond what the law required of him. And in fact, Martha in this story is demonstrating the exact kind of hospitality that Jesus is talking about in the parable of the Good Samaritan. And after Jesus tells the story, he asks, tell me, which one of the 3 men who saw the wounded man proved to be the good neighbour, the true neighbour? And the religious man replies, the one who demonstrated kindness and mercy, and to which Jesus replies, go and do the same as he. So Jesus has been teaching about taking action versus being passive. And yet when he gets to Martha's house, it's her action that he questions, whereas Mary is apparently passive. It kind of highlights really that it's our actions, that is what we do, is not really so much the issue as the posture of our hearts. Because kindness, mercy, all come from the overflow of a heart that's kind, loving, and unhindered. And I think what Jesus disliked about the Pharisees was that they did all the right things. They checked every box on the super religious dude's list, but their hearts were not in the right place. Their hearts weren't soft. And the Pharisees were all about doing the right things to get into heaven rather than necessarily doing what God had asked of them. In the movie, What Dreams May Come, there's a really powerful scene that beautifully illustrates sacrificial love. Robin Williams' character, Chris, decides that the only way to reach his wife, who's trapped in hell, is to go there himself. He chooses to enter into her suffering and refuses to leave her alone in her pain. And in that act of selfless love, everything changes and it leads to her redemption. Isn't that the very heart of what Jesus has done for us? Just like Chris with his wife, Jesus meets us in our deepest sorrow and refuses to leave us there. He weeps with us, steps into our pain, and walks with us through it. And that changes everything. Even in the midst of deep grief, after her brother has died, Martha runs out to meet Jesus and says, Lord, if you had come sooner, my brother would not have died. And then she makes this profound statement of faith. Yes, Lord, I do believe that you are the anointed one, the Son of God, who has come into the world for us. She had the faith to believe that resurrection was possible for her brother even before she saw it. I think Martha was an incredible woman. Her faith was not dependent on circumstances. She trusted in who Jesus was. She believed in him in the face of the deepest loss. And she believed before the miracle. That was real faith. So what can we learn from Martha's story? I think Martha's story gives us permission to be human, to have our moments of frustration while still maintaining a deep and vibrant faith. Martha's story reminds us also, even in the face of grief, loss, and overwhelming demands, Jesus sees us. He knows us, and he's inviting us into a deeper relationship with him. So as we navigate our busy lives with so many distractions pulling us in different directions, may we hear Jesus' loving invitation to slow down and spend time with him. May we keep showing up, keep believing, and keep making space to walk with him or sit at his feet. And may we, like Martha did, hold on to our faith even when life is hard. And may we remember that no matter how final our situations may seem, God isn't finished with our stories yet. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If something from this episode has touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Please connect with me on Facebook at Jennifer Carter Writer, or visit my website at jennifercarterbooks.com, where you can grab my free devotional, Meeting Jesus, which explores the stories of 7 women who met Jesus and shows how they found hope even in the middle of their difficult seasons. Next week, we'll be exploring the stories of Deborah and Jael, 2 women God called to step into roles that would change the course of Israel's history. But until then, please remember, no matter how things look right now, God isn't finished with your story yet.